Hello, welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. I'm back after a few weeks. Sorry about the last few weeks. I found myself in the hospital. Kind of a difficult situation, but I'm back and back to almost perfect health. So we are going to do a show tonight on what works and what does not in Sequence Generator Pro. Alex is going to moderate it for us. But before that, as always, we are going to show off our image of the week. This week's image of the week was a really cool one. NGC 1333, a reflection nebula done by Paul Patterson. And one of the cool things, one of the things I actually appreciated about this was, I believe Paul is typically a PixInsight processor, but after watching our show, what was it, 3 weeks ago, he gave Astro Pixel processor a try. And he basically processed all this in Astro Pixel processor. At the end of his description, he does say he did go back and do his final processing in PixInsight, but we all do that, right? Go to the tool you're most comfortable in, but it's good to have a lot of tools in your box. But yeah, thank you, Paul, for submitting great image. Check this one out on our website so you can see it full resolution. I hate showing off these images over the stream because it just does them no justice. That's why I only take a few seconds on them. And I guess my talking is the, I don't know, the most useful part of it because you really have to see it full resolution. All that said, I am going to steal my camera back. Guys, please log on to our site, go to chat, enter any questions you have on Sequence Generator Pro, any comments, take part in this discussion. That said, Alex is in the room, and I am going to hand the mic right over to him. Alex,
okay.
There you go.
Hi. First thing we should do probably is move Adam aside, and I'll sit in his kitchen for a while. And what we're going to do today is have an open session about Sequence Generator Pro. Be sure you're entering your questions over in the chat over here. Okay, see all this stuff over. Well, we've got a few questions already, but I strongly encourage you to sign in over there and ask your questions, and we'll get to them momentarily. But before we do that, let me see, where are we going next? And I would strongly suggest that you try to help answer these questions as much as you can. So please help answer the questions as you're going along. Okay, let's see. I suppose I should be showing the actual screen. If you go to the astroimagingchannel.com archive, this is our website over here, as you know, and you just go click on the Astro Imaging channel. I'm sure you all know how to get there. All right. And just keep and go through there. You will find lots and lots and lots of our past programs, and look through the past shows in general. In them, you're going to find, and this is the big URL up here. I'm going to leave that up there for momentarily so you guys can all copy it if you want to, or you can come back and get it later. But this was actually with Jared and Ken Pendlebury, Jared Wellman. These are the guys that wrote Sequence Generator Pro. They wanted a cost-effective system that would run your system pretty much all night, pretty much automated, lots of traps in it to make sure that if it gets lost, it'll find itself and get back on track and can take all your images for you. And they did a show for us. I didn't put the date here, but they did a show for us sometime in the past. There's the URL to get to it. In addition, we had a session on using autofocus itself using Sequence Generator Pro. And here's the URL for that. It's over on YouTube. You can go over and get that. If you copy that down or type it into your browser, you should be able to go right to it. We also had a couple of other sessions. I did a Messier marathon once and using Sequence Generator Pro as the source for doing that. And of course, during that time, we spent a lot of time talking about how to use Sequence Generator Pro. Again, you can find the URL for that. And that was actually a 2-week session. So here's another URL related to the same show. And it gives you the time that we were in there watching that whole thing. But I think we had 2 whole shows on it, and we went through a lot of details as to how to set things up, a lot of the parameters that you need to put in to make a good sequence. I want to remind you, if you are just starting in Sequence Generator Pro, there's lots of good resources out there. My favorite is the one that I wrote, and you can find the URL for that here. It's called Sequence Generator Pro, the first week. And I don't know if anybody actually takes a week to go through it or anything, but that was the idea, was that every night you focus on a different aspects of it, getting the computer ready, getting the communications working, running a little sequence, plate solving and pointing, auto-focusing, meridian flips, and then your first full sequence. You can find it on my website. It's right down here, the second entry down. And I guess that's the link straight to it, not to my website. My website is just Alex Astro at the articles index. Okay. And I think, oh, and of course, you can go to Main Sequence Software. They've got a website, and about halfway through that website, you'll find the Sequence Generator Pro PDF manual. My reading of all this is that you have to be a little bit careful with Sequence Generator Pro, in that it doesn't necessarily the help screen in Sequence Generator Pro, the program, is not updated in lockstep with the way the program is written. Nor is this PDF. I think this PDF is a little more up to date. I think they go back and refresh it. But there are 3 places to get help from Main Sequence Software itself, and none of them exactly match with all the features and all the different updates and things like that. But here's one of them. Here's one of my favorite. It's got a huge table of contents. It is a active PDF where you can click on things and it'll take you to, it's got links in it and stuff like that. Another place to get help with Sequence Generator Pro is to go to the website itself, and they've got a very extensive forum here. Now, note this one here in particular, how to ask for help. What they almost always ask you to do is to put your file. If you're having a problem with something, put your log file on the put your log file someplace like a Dropbox or thebox.com or something like that, someplace where you can share the link to it. And then you put your link in here and you tell them what's going wrong and what time of the night it went wrong, because the log file itself is time stamped so that you can look up things. And you can look up stuff right here in the Main Sequence Software forum, and it helps a lot if you really follow the protocols, read this thing about how to ask for help, and take it from there. And I think, yeah, that's the end of the slideshow. So the next thing we're going to do is get rid of that slideshow, and we're going to start looking. Oh, I should tell you something else I'm doing. Let's see. I'm going to go over to my Type VNC, and I've got 2 sessions of Type VNC running right now. One is a computer that I've got sitting here next to me, and I'm going to be able to come on over here and make changes on this computer. If you have any questions, I can show you where things are and stuff like that. But also, out in my backyard right now, I've got a session running on SGP, and I've been goofing around with it while I was waiting for the show to start, just to make sure things would work. And I'm actually running a session back there. So it looks like the first question we've got is about focusing. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about focusing to start with. And in order to do that, I'm gonna go over here to the cogs, the interlocking cogs, and there's a focus control on it. And I'm just gonna run a focusing session, and hopefully it won't mess up for me. Right now, the sequence is actually paused. I, of course, have a great big old full moon running out there. When you run an autofocus session, this HFR is kind of phony baloney to start with because it doesn't have any information at all. But you can you can see my steps are here. It's just taken a picture, and the picture was shows that it's got an average of a little bit more than 3.6 half flux ratio, which is basically measuring how big the star is. So look how big the stars are in this, and it labels it all out as to how big all the stars are. And so it's taking another picture, it's analyzing the star data, and it pops up another one. And now it draws a line between the two. And this is what it does this. Now, before it started, it was already at position 1064. So the first thing it did was it stepped out 1, 2, 3 full sections. I've told it to do 7 steps in my focusing. So it stepped out 3 on one side, and it's going to step back 3 on the other side. And when it did that, I've defined these particular distances here to be just about 1 critical focus zone, a little bit more than that, but that's what I find works well for me. So it stepped out 2 chunks of that all the way up to 1088, and it took a picture and analyzed where the stars were. Then it took another, then it stepped in, took another picture, stepped in, took another picture. It's just finished its 4th picture, and it's going to go back up the other side. So that's what it looks like when it's actually doing a focusing run. I'm going to come back over to the questions over here.
Elias is asking, is there a trick to getting a V curve when using autofocus in SGP? And I don't know if you want to answer that. I think this is one that,
that's,
if you want to go around the room, we'd all be able to go ahead.
That's kind of what I'm trying to answer. I just wanted to see if while the whole world is watching, or all 30 people, if it would actually do kind of a V curve. And yeah, there's a trick to getting a V curve. One is to have a very nice refractor and a fairly stable air. And then to reality, it's making sure that these steps here are set right. Make sure that you've got them separated out just about where they want. And that looks pretty V-ish to me. So I think that I at least have mastered that particular trick. Now, one of the other things you need to do is make sure that there's not a lot of play in your focuser. That is, when it was at 1064 and it decided to move out, okay, here's a problem. And we could run it again, but I'll just explain the problem in a little bit. That when I told it to move out 8 big steps, it moved out 8 big steps. That's one movement. And so it was at 1072, and then at 1080, and then at 1088. Exactly. There is very little, I've got a RoboFocus out there. There's very little play in the focuser. It's sitting on a NP 101, okay, refractor. So now if there had been slop in my gears on my focuser, that 1072 still would have said 1072, but it might have been at 1071 or 1075 or something like that. Came all the way up here, and then it started coming back down, and it continued to come down. Okay, it continued to move inward all the way along, but as it came back up here, now when it gets up here, it's got to come back down to here. Well, it's actually just when it gets over here, it's got to come back to over here. If there is slop in the focuser, that is, that not everything is tight and you've got a lot of backlash, it's not going to come back to 1064 like it should. Now, you saw that warning come up. What it did was it calculated that for this particular point right here, where the 2 V's crossed, it should have a very, very low half flux error, okay? And it didn't get that number. It got a worse number than that. Now, there could be a number of reasons for that. One is that the seeing was bad tonight, okay? And I just got different size stars. That's kind of hard to believe since everything else is pretty much picture perfect. You know what I mean? So I don't know exactly what went wrong out there. I've run a focusing about 4 times tonight so far. Just because I saw the questions coming up and things like that. And this is the first time I've had an error show up. Incidentally, it will continue to, after giving me that warning, it will continue to take pictures for me all night. It may be that I've got a less than perfect focus, or it may be that I've got a perfect focus and for some reason it miscalculated, something like that. Okay, is there a trick? I'm going to say that the first trick is to make sure that your focuser travel is tight and it's not going to wobble around. Secondly, it's to make sure that you've defined the difference between steps pretty accurately. Now, you may be a little bothered if, like this one up here, if it's off a little bit, like there's a gull wing here. So I don't know if you can see the cursor up here, but if this is a little bit wider and then it starts coming down and then it goes back up and it gets wide again, what that means is that you're going too far. All right, that these steps are bigger than they should be, and that the number of steps you've got is too many. And by the time it got up here, it got so screwed up that it just wasn't even accurate anymore. So you just need to cut down on the number of steps you got going all together, or the steps in each individual increment here. That would be my suggestion for you. Let me go back to, let me see if I can do this. Okay, where are we?
You know, I do want to say, if you don't mind, I'll add one thing to that.
Please do it. Everybody add their stuff as they go along.
So Alex actually got a great V curve, like right off the bat. And I'm thinking back, and when I shoot with the refractor, I would tend to get that perfect V curve, a wide field refractor. I think when I was using either the RC or the SCT, it was a little bit more hit and miss. So I would try and recognize the scenarios where I would have issues with focus. And it would always come down to a few things, or at least during cool down, I would rarely have a really good V curve. My cool down would tend to be when it wasn't quite dark enough to be imaging. Like, in other words, I'd be cooling down, I'd pick my target, I'd slew to my target, I'd plate solve on my target, I'd begin my first autofocus, but it wasn't quite dark enough to begin imaging. At those moments, I might not have the perfect V curve. So I'd recognize that, and I would say to myself, you know what? You're automated, but pay attention during these first 20 minutes. Make sure your focus is good. And as long as I did that, oh, I am sorry about that. As long as I did that, I was more likely to not have a screwed up session. And I actually would rarely get a bad V curve in the middle of the night. It was just during those particular first few hours. And then I think once everything stabilized, it was good. What Alex said about having everything tight, I would say, yeah, the closer you are to mechanical perfection, the more likely you are to have a V curve, a good V curve. But that's, I'm going to say what I would add. It was specifically the reflector setups that were slightly more difficult, and just required me to be present for during that first half hour to an hour. Anyone else in the room is welcome to add, I'm sure, on that.
Okay, I hope that helped some.
Alex, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you said that between those steps, your role is to use one critical focus zone.
Yes, actually, it's a little bit more than that.
Okay,
that's where I started.
So what we should explain. I just wanted you to clarify that a little bit for people who are not familiar with
what a critical focus zone is. Okay. Let me see. I've got too many computers running here. Let me see if I can do this properly.
So Wilms Low Astro has a calculator. If you do a search on the internet just saying critical focus zone telescope, you will find the form it's a web page that calculates. You put your focal ratio, camera pixel size, and binning. It just calculates the critical focus zone for you. And then the next step is to know how many microns is one step worth in your focuser. You have to find out from the manufacturer, and then you have to multiply that by, divide that by the critical focus zone to get how many steps you need to move. Right? Am I correct?
Yeah, you have to know your focuser as well as the distance of the actual yeah, how much each step moves. Now let's be clear here. There are various steps in the term step. Can somebody give me a confirmation? Am I showing my Sequence Generator Pro screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. The RoboFocus itself has, well, I don't know how, it's like 4 or 5, if it's like 50,000 steps from one end of my focuser to the other. Okay. But each of those steps I can group together into bigger steps, movement steps or units of some kind. I don't know what they're called actually, because it's been a long time since I set up my RoboFocus. But so it takes about, let's say, I think there's 8 or something like that of the little baby steps that the RoboFocus is actually making to make up what I call one step here. And then there are from 1080 to 1088, there's all of those steps. That's really would be, well, if there's 8 steps in each of the RoboFocus steps, there's really 64 steps from this one's 1072 to 1080. So don't let that get you confused. The point is that you have to figure out how far your focuser moves in one step. Tolga asked me to explain what a critical focus zone is. It's hard to do that without a graph, but imagine that the light coming in from infinity bends your telescope. Where am I? The light coming in from infinity on a typical optic, if it hits the left side of your scope, it bends the light to the right, and if it hits the right side, it bends the light to the left. So you wind up with a triangle of light coming in.
Alex?
Yeah.
Can I give my simple-minded explanation of the critical focus zone?
Yeah, please do.
It's just the range of the focuser position that gives you the exact or the best focus under those conditions. Not a single spot, but a range of travel along your focuser.
Yeah, I think of it the same way.
Yeah.
The amount you can turn your focuser and still be in focus.
Yeah, because let me see. That's going to get us confused. I'm not going there. Someday, actually, we did a presentation about critical focus zone a long time ago, and we are not going to go there now because it's too complicated. Okay, let me go back to,
because to figure out those steps, not the focus steps, but those steps between your dots in the V curve.
yeah.
To figure out the step, how many steps you need to move to get those to move that much, you need to figure that out too, the whole thing. You need to know
Yes.
the F ratio of your telescope. You need to know the critical focus zone of your telescope. You need to know how much your focuser moves per step, how many microns it moves. And then that will give you how much for, let's say, for F3 system with a, let's say, like a really tight focuser, like an FLI Atlas, you might have to move 300 steps between those dots. But with an F10 system, you might have to move 2,000 steps between those dots.
And
So
you
that's
have
what I was
to
trying to
figure those
clarify.
out. I don't know if I can do this with it connected. Okay. To set up your focuser, you start over in the Equipment Profile Manager, Focus, and you click the settings here. You tell it where it is, and you tell it how far out it can possibly go. There's some other settings that you do over in RoboFocus itself, and my other focusers have even. A fine focus step size is 2, and a coarse focus step size is 4. These are set up so that I know, see, that's these numbers right here. Okay, they have nothing to do with autofocus though. When I click use autofocus and tell it to set, you can see that I've expressed it over here where I'm going to, what step size is going to be. And that's my 8 is the step size. And I figured that's how far it takes for the focuser to move into the critical focus zone and outside the critical focus zone. Okay, so that's the number that I put in there. And that is the number you saw. That 8 is the difference between those steps when it stopped to take another picture. Okay, so does that answer as well as we can the auto-focusing question to start with? Let me see, where are we over here? I don't want, okay, where are we? What's the next question?
Elias is asking specifically about the Optec TCF Leo focuser. He says he's not able to get a V curve anymore when using autofocus with SGP. So I'm assuming you were having, I'm assuming it was working, but then it stopped working the way you're asking that question. Is anyone familiar with that specific focuser, whether there was some sort of change or anything?
I'm not familiar with that particular focuser.
Yeah, I will say this. Sequence Generator Pro did change the routine to improve focusing for systems with central obstructions. I don't remember when that was. I'm going to say maybe 1.5 to 2 years ago, but I don't know if that would have anything to do with it changing the way the behavior of that particular focuser. So that's all I could probably say. Being that you're asking here, I'm guessing you might have already asked on the Sequence Generator Pro forum. If not, it's probably worth asking there.
Okay, I want to do something different here. In order to find out what these step sizes should be, use a bat mask or something like that and get a perfect focus using your bat mask. What you do is you put the bat mask on the front, stare at a bright star, and actually I should stop this because I don't want to really be doing this. I just wanted this graph back up. Find a star, focus on it as well as you can, and note where your focus position is. See the current position up here? And then click on the picture that you just took. And I don't think I can do it from here. Let's go back over to here. This is a fairly well focused. And let me see, what do I do to compute my full width half maxes? Okay, look at my full width half maxes. They're like 1.1, 1. So you see how things are focused here? Okay, or I could check my statistics. Where's my statistics button? I never use these things, but honest, they're up here. Oh, there we go. It's the sigma. Check my statistics, and I find out that I can get a particular area here, but I find out that in general my half flux radius is 0.89. Okay, now, oops, I'm getting my pen here. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to note that it's 0.89. And then I'm going to step this out of position. I'm going to go with my coarse focuser, and I'm going to take a step in, another step in, another step in, another step in, until, oops, where did I start? I don't know where I started, but then I'm going to check. I was 1079, I think, at the start there. And right now I'm at 1047. See this number up here? Okay, and then I'm going to take another picture. Where's my plant frame and focus? Is that it? I can never tell which one of these is which. And I'm going to take a 4-second picture at 4x4 because this one's 4x4. Oops, I don't want to. I just want to take one. So I'm going to take a 4-second picture, a 5-second picture, I guess it is. I'm going to start over, guys, because I screwed that up. And I'm going to get the statistics on this one. Where's my statistics? My statistics are over here. And now my half flux radius is 1.47. Okay, so I was at 0.9 essentially, and now I'm at 1.5. So, and I want to find out how far I have to move my focuser to make my image about twice the size it used to be. Does that make sense to you? To make my half flux radius twice the size it was before. And so now I've moved it all the way down to 1035, and from 1079 to 1035, I get a total of what is that, 64? No, it's 44. 1079 to 1035, and now I do my half flux, and do I have to recalculate that? Now my half flux radio is 2.4. That overdid it. So I know that I need to move it about 44 to have that, about 40. All right. So 40, I want my whole movement from one end of my focuser to the other. You know what I mean? That focusing run, and by that I mean this right here. I would want that to run from, well, 1035 is wrong. It should be up more like 1067 or whatever it is. But I want it to run 25 to one side and 25 to another. And I want to do it in 7 steps. So that means I should be moving about 8 steps per step here. That's how you figure out what your step size should be. Take a picture of the middle, take a picture of a focus star, figure out where you are for the focus star, move the focuser until, and just by experimentation, until your half flux radius is about twice the size of what it used to be. And the difference between those two, you divide that by the number of steps you want to take, by the number of steps, by the number of exposures you want to try in your experiment. That should give you an idea of how big your steps should be. Okay. Sorry, it took me a while to get that out, but that's what it is. And so, okay, where are we on the questions, Coach?
I see one coming in from Edmund Schrum, and we might be the right guys to answer this. Related to a Mach 1, he used SGP in Mach 1, and I remember seeing someone start in the inverted position. How do you achieve that in Sequence Generator Pro?
I'm sorry, I'm not finding the question. What's your name?
Edmund Schum. Right below Elias's, is there a trick to getting a B?
Is there a trick to getting the B? Oh, he's all the way back at 1831. Okay, just see, someone started with the inverted position.
And so I'm assuming he's talking about the meridian delay, and I'll also presume you're familiar with it. But what I'm thinking is to use it in Sequence Generator Pro. First of all, I'm going to say it might be a little dangerous. I don't think I would ever really want to combine the meridian delay feature with any sort of automation just because of the risk. But you may be able to, in the astrophysics driver, set the meridian delay. And that's how you would probably get Sequence Generator Pro to do it. I'm assuming that. I don't know. Anyone else in the room know?
By inverted position, you mean that it's on, the telescope is on the east side and it's pointing to the east.
Yes, that's what I'm presuming. like flipping in advance, so to speak.
I don't know that there is a way to tell Sequence Generator Pro to start in that position. Does anybody know that there is a way to tell Sequence Generator Pro to start that way?
I don't think you're actually telling Sequence Generator Pro that. What I think you're doing is you're telling the driver. The driver, I think, fools the mount, or not necessarily fools the mount, but tells the mount that the meridian is in a different location.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't believe that's an SGP question, though. It may be, but I don't believe it is.
I think it's more. It's going to be in the sequence, or excuse me, in the astrophysics driver.
Edward, if what you want to do is start your imaging run with the telescope on the east side and pointing to the east, you can send it there. Just send it that way so that it use your hand controls and send it that way. And it will go there. And when you've got it centered like that, just start the run. It will never need to do a meridian flip at that point. But I don't understand why you need to do that, why you would want to do that. But so I'm not going to speculate as to how to do it or anything else, really.
Yeah, I'm jumping down. If you do have any follow-up questions on that,
Take me forever to figure out those.
Just go ahead and enter them. I will say, like, Sequence Generator Pro is an automation program, and it's designed to make the meridian flip easy and basically only take a minute and a half to 2 minutes. So to flip in advance, I just don't see the benefit, particularly when it's something you can do manually, and then just have Sequence Generator Pro run the imaging part of your session. You've already flipped in advance, which probably means you're going to come out a few hours later or 6 or 8 hours later to shut it all down. So maybe that you don't need to resolve after the meridian flip. So maybe you're asking a question and I'm asking you, why would you want to use that? But maybe you have a good reason. So that's why I say follow up. Sorry, Alex, go ahead.
I don't know where I'm going because there's a whole lot of questions here that, okay, the George has asked a question. Hey, can you send me a spreadsheet on how to set your system up? And the answer is no, we can't. We don't know. There's so many different things to do that you've got to set up your system for you. I don't know what your system is. If what you're asking is, if you're focusing on that one question about how to figure out what your step sizes should be, use the suggestion I gave you to take a focused star and then move your telescope, experimenting until you get that star to be about twice as big as it was before. Divide that number by about 4, and then use 7 or 9 focusing steps in order to pull off your focusing program. Okay, that ought to do it. You don't need anything much more complicated than that, as far as I know. Adam, would you run ahead on the? I'm gonna start talking with the Elias's that question, which came in at 1839. Oh no, there's a couple ahead of that. Yeah, I'm going to start with Renan's here. Could you look forward to see if there's anything we need to jump ahead on?
Sure.
Plate solve. I use APM catalog only. Is there any advantage of using both catalogs, APM and UCAC3? My answer is not that I know about. Maybe Adam, in running ahead like this, is going to find somebody's smarter than I am, which is quite possible, and be able to answer that particular question. So I use the UCAC3 catalog, I think. I mean, that's how careful I am to check. Let me see. Under Tools, Equipment Profile Manager, Plate Solve. I got lots of configurations here because I don't clean things up very well. Settings, think this is where I'd find my catalog, and it doesn't tell me which catalog I got. Yeah, I think I'm using UCAC here. I think I might use the other one out of the observatory, and I don't notice any difference. Elias, I had it working perfectly the first month, but since then, and Elias, I don't know if you're talking about Sequence Generator Pro in general or the focuser. If it used to work and it stopped working, then check the things we talked about. The backlash, make sure everything is solid the way it's supposed to be, and then just start from scratch. It's easier to start from scratch sometimes than to try to figure out where it went wrong. And so go ahead and figure out what your step size should be and run a few focusing runs till you get it right. Frame and focus often clogs my buffer and then crashes. Any suggestions? I have never had that problem, so I don't know. Adam, you're racing ahead of there. Has anybody else got any suggestions for that? Or does anybody else in the room have something to say?
You know the way these questions come in and answers, they're all over the place, but I don't see any other comments on that particular one. I don't know. I mean, that's one of those that could come from so many different places. How many images per second, or in other words, what is the exposure length per image? I also hear someone's, I don't know, clock radio voice or something like that in there. John, I don't quite know what would be causing that. You can ask that on the SGP website. Maybe they have some sort of idea. It could have something to do with the camera if it's lots of frames per second. The fact that it's your buffer, I don't know whether you're talking about like necessarily your memory or your camera's buffer. So it's hard for me to answer that without further details. And even if I got the further details, I might not be the right one to answer that, depending on what's causing the issue.
I've never, as far as I know, never had a problem doing that. Obviously running it right now, I'm running some quick downloads.
Yeah, I'm thinking like some sort of out of memory issue is like what I'm kind of envisioning here, unless it's actually the buffer on the camera, which would cause some sort of camera error. So the only thing I want to comment I want to point out is Jeffrey Geis is saying, and I don't know what in reference to. It's funny you mentioned the plate solve in SGP. He's found that once he uses Astro Tortilla once after he polar aligns, it puts a good point in EQ mod. All subsequent plate solve 2 solves in SGP work perfectly. So what I'll say, my comment to that is when I'm having one of those days where nothing will solve, I tend to do a blind solve and sync, I believe. Yes. And it will put, for some reason, after nothing's working, no reason why it's not working, that blind solve and sync will get it, will solve it, will sync it, and all subsequent solves will then work. So that would be my equivalent to what you're saying. And I heard a yes in there, so I'm
yeah, I agree with you that although I've got an observatory in my backyard, one out in the desert, and the machines are always in the same place every night. So I don't. All I do when I go out on my backyard observatory is tell it to go to a star and come back in the house, and then I start the program, and it almost always finds the plate solve on the first try out of plate solve 2. But when it's misbehaving, and it has at times in the past, or sometimes when I'm doing remote imaging, it can't seem to find that first solve. And so I've got AS and server, or whatever that thing is, the remote blind solve. I've got that loaded on all 3 of my computers that I use for imaging. And I don't use Astro Tortilla. I just, because I think Astro Tortilla can be done locally or it can be done remotely. But I always just blind solve locally by using the ANS server, whatever that name of that thing is.
That's a good point about that answer.
Yeah. Well, what, that it's hard to say, or that it's good to use it in the first place? At any rate, just do a blind solve with however you can best do a blind solve. And that once your telescope is synced, from that point on, any plate solver ought to work pretty good. Nicole asks, are there any benefits of using SGP with a one-shot color CMOS camera? Yeah, the same benefits that you get from everything else. I think that you've got more lines. What's showing on the screen now, incidentally, on the Astro Imaging channel? My screen?
Your screen, Sequence Generator Pro.
Okay. Where's my, we're in the middle of I've been running this like for how long, trying to download pictures every 4 seconds, and I haven't had any problems. So I don't know what the one question was about there. With the buffer overloads. Okay, where were we?
So
if I were setting up a sequence for a well, this is a sequence for a come here. There we go. This is my sequence for a narrow band, so HAS2, and if I were to set up one for LRGB, it would probably have 8 lines or something like that with and so it would look more complicated. If I were using a one-shot color camera or a DSLR, I'd probably have maybe 4 lines, each of them with 10 or 12 and the repeat, and I'd have an ISO here instead of a bin, but I wouldn't have to have different filters. So in that sense, yeah, it's not as complicated taking pictures with a one-shot color camera. But is there any benefits? Sure. All the other things that are going on with Sequence Generator Pro, you've got at your disposal. You can be sleeping tonight instead of watching your computer. It can be doing the automatic focusing every hour or every 10 frames or whatever you want to do. It can do the automatic focusing, which if you don't have SGP or some other program like that, it can't do it. So, Nicole, when you asked the question, is there any benefit with using a one-shot color CMOS camera? Sure, there's lots of benefits to using Sequence Generator Pro. It's slightly less complicated than acquisition of an LRGB HA set, but all the other benefits of Sequence Generator Pro are there. If I don't, Jeffrey, what are you talking about? If I don't, PS2 plate software will search forever. Okay. I don't know where your if you don't is.
He's the one that he's the one that mentioned the
can't get that. Oh,
initially getting a good point.
True.
The Astro Tortilla.
True. Yeah, you might need to do a blind solve. If your plate solve 2 can go up to what, 2,500 iterations before it says, I can't find it. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, if it doesn't find it in the first 50 or 100, just screw it. It ain't gonna find it. I mean, that's not always true. I have had occasions where I've just let it run and it gets it at 650 or something silly like that. But if it hasn't made it in the first 100, stop it and do a blind solve. Okay, and that Astro Tortilla is a blind solve. I use ANSFER to do the same thing, but yeah, it does the same kind of thing.
Alec,
I have a question.
Go ahead, Tolga.
Is there a way to limit how much of the image you're downloading when you're doing plate solving or focusing?
Pardon? Okay.
Can you subframe for plate solving and focusing, or do you have to use the whole entire chip?
I don't know if there's any
of that one guy's problem where he is having problems with buffering, because some cameras with large, like 42 megapixel, 36 megapixel cameras could take up a lot of room.
Okay. You see this picture that I've got right here? I'm going to click use a subframe. I'm going to draw a subframe on it. And now I'm going to start my imaging run. And you can see that it's going to just get this central section.
Yeah, there you go. So that might limit how much data you're bringing into the software, which might take care of that buffer problem.
Now, can I plate solve this? I really don't know. I've never tried.
Well, you wouldn't need to plate solve that necessarily. That's the question that I have about the buffering. Are you trying to download too much stuff in between subframes? If so, then this subframe will work. Subframe will also help if the outer edges of your chip is real bad, and basically it's just kind of bad data, not useful when it comes to focusing.
Or you're saying, Alex, or Adam, are you talking about also trimming off the edges for plate solving? Because sometimes you get field curved stars, and that'll throw off some of the algorithms.
Same principle, yeah. It'll mess up your plate solving in some cases. It'll mess up your focusing in some cases. Not necessarily screwed up completely, but just add unwanted stuff into there. Unwanted. It makes your focusing noisy. Alex, I do have pulled up on my screen right now Elias's what Elias shared in chat. Do you mind if I take over the?
Yeah, I don't know how that happens anyway. So take over whatever you want.
Okay, so Elias is sharing this, and now let me see if you are looking at my screen or Alex's screen. You're still looking at Alex's screen. Here you go. Now you're looking at my screen. So Elias shared this. He said he was getting better plate solves previously. And yes, that is one horribly ugly V curve. The same here. I think you're looking at this one too. Yes. Okay. So
yeah, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, it's about as bad as it gets, right? It's completely useless. I want to go back to that other screen. So I'm looking at this screen. So what can I glean from this? I don't see a lot of stars being sampled. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stars, and I'm guessing maybe there's a couple hidden behind the autofocus screen there, but still, I'm not satisfied with the number of stars. How do you get more stars in there? You might have to increase your exposure. I don't know what your exposure is. Can I see it here? No. If you're not getting good enough sampling, then increase your exposure, increase the number of stars. You might have to go kind of crazy. You might have much, much longer exposure. I'm going to guess just by looking at the number of stars, you're using a longer focal length mirrored system as opposed to a refractor. And you're possibly looking in a region of the sky where there aren't many stars. If you're on a challenging object like that, I believe Sequence Generator Pro will let you pick. Let me think about this. I think it'll let you pick a region to slew to autofocus. If not, you can set basically a target that you know is a star-rich region and have it slew to that and autofocus and then slew back to your primary imaging target. But trying to be as helpful as possible here, the first thing I see there is not many stars. And I think you've got to get more stars in there. You've got to get more stars sampled to get a more useful, just give Sequence Generator Pro more data to do that. The thing that Tolga brought up is it looks like you might not be using a high enough step size. Determine your critical focus zone and then use that as a lower limit for step size. You might end up doubling it. You might end up tripling it or even going higher. Until your V-curves flatten out and get useless, until your V-curves turn into, I'll say, seagulls, they're at least useful for figuring that sort of thing out. So find out your critical focus zone and then boost it a lot to kind of see where you're getting those widening, the widening of the V, and then bring it back down and get it as tight as possible. it might involve using 9 or 11 samples, but then for your imaging session, settling on 7, and just trying to maximize the amount of steps you can get into those 7 points.
As I can see it, he's got what, 50 steps between each exposure?
Yeah.
The
And
10
his critical focus zone is about 1,500 steps.
Yeah, and I think what you should do is use a bat mask or somehow or another focus on a star. And then using your frame and focus and your focus controls, step out 150 or 200 and take another picture, step out another 150 or 200 and take another picture. And if you can't see any difference between those pictures, either the set screw on your focuser is not attached to your focus, it's not moving your focuser, or you have to have really a lot more steps in between each of your exposures. Does that make sense? So I think that's where you got to go with that. Okay.
All right, Alex, I'm going back to your screen.
Yeah, I'm okay.
Unless
Nicole.
Defender Pro up. I'm going to check the comments in the.
Okay. Nicole, if you don't have an automatic focuser and a filter wheel, well, you don't need a filter wheel. You got a one-shot color camera. If you don't have an automatic focuser, well, you're going to miss the benefits of automatic focusing. At some point, you'd be better off with, whatever software you want. But your original question was, is there a benefit from Sequence Generator Pro? And my original answer was, yeah, you get all the other things the Sequence Generator Pro does, whether or not you're using a set of filters or a one-shot color. Okay, so maybe there isn't much benefit for you, but what other piece of software can you find to run the system for 99 bucks anyway? You're going to have something to run that system, and Sequence Generator Pro is as good as any. And someday you will have an automatic focuser if you're going to get into this at all. By automatic, I mean a motorized focuser. Okay. I'm on the wrong key here. Looking down through the questions.
Will backlash compensation take care of focuser play?
It should. It should. It depends on what kind of slop it is.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just mechanical slop, it should recognize it and then correct for that slop. But it could be other kinds of slops, like it may be intermittent. That is, it's not even close. I mean, the focuser itself may be sloppy. The tube may be moving back and forth and stuff like that. But yeah, it should help a lot.
Yeah, as long as it's repeatable, that would basically be not really an issue.
Yeah, repeatability is the key. That if I tell it to move to this particular position, that's where it goes. Okay, Jeffrey makes a good point here that SGP runs the whole rig except for guiding. Actually, it controls the guiding too. SGP has a number of friends that work with it, PhD, PlateSolve 2, and a whole lot of other things. SGP is actually controlling them still, so keep that in mind. And then Chow points out that he uses his SGP and it works great. And then we get to against using SharpCap. I don't know. I don't use SharpCap, Nicole. So you're going to have to figure that one out. And I hope other people that have used both contribute to the conversation by typing their information in below. And then we got to the examples that we just looked at. Will backlash compensation, just the automation. You tend to steer by your mount and do most manual stuff. Yeah, there's no benefit if you're sitting there the whole time watching. There's not that much benefit. I think most of us start an SGP session and go off and do something else. If I weren't with you guys right now, I'd be watching football and the rig in the backyard would be taking pictures, and it would take pictures until I woke up tomorrow morning or the clouds came. Steps exactly just talking about who is playing music. Who's playing music? Stop that music. I've tried many to do different step sizes. Elias, all I can say is try that method I told you about, where you get something in perfect focus using your bot mask and just trial and error until you get it in perfect focus, and then step it out 100 or 200 steps and see what happens. Okay. And there's a conversation about size, type of focus dictates the type of focuser, motor, and how it's configured. Mitch, you're correct. That's that. I can't send a spreadsheet saying, oh, for this particular focuser, that's the settings, because it also changes according to the aperture of the focal ratio of the telescope and a few other things. Okay, George. We're talking about lots of different. Let me go back to my computer with this setup. Your question is, are we talking about this step size or what? We're talking about several different things all at the same time here. Your motorized focuser can make steps that are down in the microns, just incredibly small. You usually bunch a group of them together to make 1 unit's worth of step. And then you come to Sequence Generator Pro and you type however many units you want for your system. Now, I've got an Optec focuser out in the desert, and I think this number is something like 67 right here. It's on my 12-inch RC. Okay, so this 2 here on my NP101 in my backyard, out in the desert, that number right there would be 67 for my fine, and then my coarse is like 200 or something like that, 250 or something. Okay, so that's one step. But then there's another set of steps that when we go to the Equipment Profile Manager, and we tell them we want to use our focus settings here. Here's 8. This is the step size that I want to take a picture and then move 8 steps. So there's another place where it's talking step sizes, okay? And let me see what would happen if I went to the, I don't know if this is accurate. Oops, that won't work. Would you like to save it? No. So now I'm in a different profile. And this is one of my desert profiles. And if I go to focus, my fine focus step size is 16 on this particular one, and coarse that's this number over here. My fine focus step size is 16. That would show up over here. I don't want to do that because this is actually a live sequence that I'm running. But then when I go to using my autofocus setup, there's my step size is 65. So when, see this step size here, when I cancel out of here, cancel out of there, get back to my other program here, and I tell it to run out in the desert, the difference between this number and this number would be 65 steps, another 65 and another 65 before it takes another picture. Okay, don't run incidentally. I don't want you to run that. I'm not sure if this was mentioned, but you have to start the autofocus ring. Yeah, get to focus before you go anyplace else. Always start at focus. Now, with me, it's easy because I just shut the system down first thing in the morning and I come back at night, and except for some thermal expansion or contraction, it's in the same place it was. For those of you who have to come from home, what I'd suggest you do is you run your focusing tube out to wherever it needs to be to focus, wherever it focused at the end of the last session, and run your focuser tube out to where it's perfectly focused, and then take a black magic marker and mark the barrel right there. That's close enough to start a focus. Even though it may not be perfectly focused, you know where your focus from one time to the next is. The better the focus, the better you're using the C8. C8s have very long critical focus zones. They've got relatively long focal length, and therefore small well, and a large focal ratio, an f10. And so they've got relatively long critical focus zones. In other words, a star is in focus for a long way. When you start focusing, how close are you to focus? What I'm thinking about is the star is only in focus. Yeah, you got to be in focus. I think we covered that, Ken. Mitch, the Pegasus auto needs 100 steps. Mitch, your Pegasus autofocuser may need 160 steps. Others may be different. That's something you got to determine for yourself. Okay, Glenn's got a problem with the sound. Yeah, as Elias has pointed out, or Elias has pointed out, he uses a bat mask to start. And so always start with.
Alex, just to help me out, what time are you on in the comments?
Excuse me?
What time are you on in the comments? You gave me the time.
I'm down to 1857.
1857, okay.
Did I jump?
Because I see an interesting question from Lisa, but you are way up above there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so can I skip everything else down to?
I think so.
Okay, let's get down to what time?
Let's see. Lisa is at 22.
Hey, stop. Well, where should I go? Now, while I'm going there, I want to make a speech. Where should I go?
Lisa is at 2216. If you do a blind solve, how do you add that sync to your hand control?
Okay, wait a minute though. But what I want to say is, having slogged through all these comments, I love it because that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing on the astroimaging channel.
Mhm.
You guys should be making these comments as you go along. Okay, now at 1916, Lisa, if you do a blind solve, how do you add that sync to your hand control? I don't think you have to. I think it's done automatically.
Yep,
Isn't it?
it is done automatically. Now,
Yeah.
with the Mach 1, I believe there's some sort of warning that you have to be careful going back and forth, syncing from your hand control to your computer. You might be okay slewing from using your computer, then slewing using your hand control. But I think if you go back and forth syncing from one to the other, it might get confused.
Lisa, may I suggest you never, put your hand controller away. You don't need it for anything.
Yes, exactly. If you're using your PC, use your PC. And otherwise...
Every once in a while, like on a cold night, I'll pick my hand controller up and maybe stick it up under the jacket or something like that, just to warm it up because, it just feels lonely. It never gets touched. It never gets used for anything. My hand controller just sits there. You don't need it for anything with Sequence Generator Pro and the plate solving and stuff like that. Okay? But having done a solve, it's actually called a solve and sync, I think. So that once you do a solve, it corrects your pointing. And as far as I know, it always corrects the pointing back at the scope. Back at the hand control, if that, I think is what I mean. Is the rotation supposed to be read from the fifth?
So what you're saying is that Sequence Generator Pro syncs the mount to the last solve?
Yes.
It can if you choose to sync it that way. Yes.
Oh, okay. So you don't have to separately go into the hand controller and sync it again.
No.
Exactly.
No. It's already there. Is rotation supposed to be read from the fit setter when using a previous image? When I try framing, if it fetches a standard image of the target, it doesn't seem to use rotation from the previous. I am obviously doing it wrong. What you're doing wrong, John, watch this. See if I can replicate it over here. See if I can even remember how to do this. Under tools, right? Hey, I found it. Under the framing and mosaic wizard. Okay, you type in here, this is what I'll bet you're doing. You type in whatever it is, and then you say fetch it, and it goes out and it looks up where M42 is. What you want to do is, and it goes out and finds it. What you want to do instead is click this next one down. Let me get rid of this. Click this next one down, and go browse for your image. And I'm going to pick an image that I've already taken from before. I'm going to fetch that image. Well, I guess I'm not going to fetch that image. For some reason, it's not recorded there. And here is the information for that particular image, okay? Let's see if it shows up the way it should. I don't know where it's gone, but depending on, you want to use image, you don't want to use object. Does that answer your question? Now it goes up and it finds it, and it is that object. But you see, that's where my framing and my version from my old object, that's where it would be in the Heart Nebula. Or, yeah, that's the Heart Nebula, right? Okay. So does that answer your question? Yes, this is the image of wherever I told it to fetch it from. But that is based on my image. That's the location from my image. Does that answer your question? Did you have a rotation set in your old image? Because that is exactly what that's what mine came out like. Okay.
Okay, it plate solves fine, but doesn't prompt him to rotate the camera.
Okay.
If yeah,
Do you have this down here checked? And then when you get out of here, yes, I want to enter. Then all you've done with that stuff is look stuff up. You have to come back over to the target itself and this has to be checked down here. Rotate the camera. The information from the mosaic finder will be transferred into here, and if it's rotated, there'll be a check right there. But if it's not rotating, then it's because this box is not checked. Okay? Does that make sense to you?
He doesn't have an automatic rotator, so he would have to use the manual rotator function.
Yes.
Or the manual rotator. Do they call it a wizard?
Well, what the manual rotator doesn't actually exist. What the manual rotator is you see these little buggers right in here, these things. You want to pause the telescope with the message rotate to, okay? Manual focus, run autofocus, run script, all these other things. It's actually going to set one of these things saying to manually rotate. And so what will happen is if you are not properly rotated, one of these will show up, it will stop, and you will have a message there saying you have to rotate. So you rotate to that position. Now, since you don't have an automatic rotator, it might be tricky because you have to make sure that you're rotated to that position before you start. Does that make sense? Okay, where are we? I'm at 1917. Where should I go? Chow has pointed out, yep, yeah, always plate solve from the night before and try to match that plate solve if you're collecting a bunch of data. Okay, John, I don't know where you're getting. Try using the binning, John, in order to overcome. I mean, for framing and focusing and stuff like that, you really don't need full-size pictures. If plate solves the previous image, not problem, but don't prompt me to rotate the camera. So are you saying that I just need to do that manually and there's no? Yeah, John, at 1923, you're asking, if you don't have an automatic rotator, if you've set that box here to where it's requiring you to rotate to a certain angle, yeah, you have to, it will always stop every time it needs to start a new target or something. It'll stop and it'll tell you to rotate it, and you physically have to rotate the thing to get it there. What most people do is they uncheck that and they have a wide enough field that they can rotate it later in software. It's a little tricky, obviously, if you're doing big mosaics and stuff, but that's just a fact of life. Okay, I only use one hand for it solves every time. I've never not one time had to use blind solve since I did it. Okay, you know, and server is a blind solver, Astronate. And server, I guess that's what it's called. Anyway, it is a blind server, so yeah, I agree with you. It works very, very well. I don't need to go to Astro Tortilla. I don't need an internet connection or anything else like that. I would need to go into targets and manually input rotate camera. John, yes, you can go in and rotate it, but that doesn't rotate the camera. All that does is stops the system and says, have you rotated the camera yet?
You know, John, I don't have I don't use a rotator, an automatic rotator, or anything like that. And basically, I'll tell you what my routine is. Well, first of all, I try and shoot everything with the camera square with the telescope, so to speak. So basically, my camera is always in the same position. And I know there will be a few targets where that won't work. And honestly, in the last few years, there was only one target where that really didn't work for me, and that was the Andromeda Galaxy. But I shot it a few times, so I would always have to do kind of the same thing. And basically what I do is in Sequence Generator Pro, I pull up the previous night's image, and I put a temporary stretch on it. Then I then I slew and sync on that same target. And then I just start that frame and focus routine. And I'm taking, I don't know, 5-second images maybe, but I can boost the binning. I could push the binning up to like 3x3, so I'm going to get stronger signal. Then I just toggle back and forth between last night's image and tonight's 5-second image. And I'm basically just looking at the star positions. They're lined up. The stars are going to be pretty darn close to lined up, but obviously the camera has to be rotated slightly. And usually it's only, I don't know, 5 degrees, 6 degrees, however far off you're going to be from one night to the next. But I basically do that whole process manually, but I also do it very infrequently, just because I like having my camera square. The other benefit to always having your camera in the same position is your flats rarely go bad if you're in a semi-permanent location. So I work that kind of convenience into my routine. And I know that doesn't quite help with your particular setup, but maybe just saying, I'm not going to get into some complex other routine. I guess I'm doing it right. So hope that was helpful.
Adam, I'd like to, well, something's on. I want to go back to, I don't think we're answering, was it John's question? Or we're not understanding it. I wish John were sitting here with us and then we could just talk about it. But you know what a lot of people do is when they first set up their camera, they rotate it in such a way that north is up or north is south or something like that. And when you do that, you don't have to worry about that stuff. Now, it gets a little tricky when you're trying to do fancy mosaics. What am I doing? I'm screen sharing. I'm not screen sharing the right stuff. Anyway, it gets a little tricky when you're trying to do a mosaic or you need to be fancy in some way like that. But frankly, I don't rotate much of anything. Only if I really want to get into doing something fancy, like maybe the Andromeda Nebula. That's how old I am. I still call it the nebula. The Andromeda Galaxy. It pretty much has to stretch from one corner of the frame to the opposite corner, not horizontally and not vertically. I mean, in order to get it in, you want to stretch from corner to corner. That's one of the few places where I would need to rotate my camera to do that, to get it all in. Most of the time, I don't need to rotate my camera like that. So it's just set at 0 degrees. It's actually set at about 2.5 degrees or something like that, because physically that's where it got rotated to, and it's been there ever since. So, John, maybe, you don't have to worry about what the angle of rotation is unless you're getting into particular types of composition where you want the celestial object at a certain place. And then never check this box, right? Come on, box. Never check this box. Okay, this box that says rotate the camera to so-and-so. Just don't do it. All right. Where are we on the comments? Oh, see, Chow already said what I just about said.
Yep, we made it through most of them. Just a few comments, and if you guys should all really take part in these discussions. We're not pointing out every single comment, but whether it's John or Elias or whoever it may be, they are all getting a ton of good information on here. So if you guys are struggling with some sort of specific issue on your setup, Alex may not know the exact way to solve that. I may not know it, but someone in comments here might have your exact setup and really be able to offer you some good advice. Definitely a great session to come back to. Tons of questions.
I hope we did some good. I hope we did some good.
Terry's pointing out something. Everyone's setup's going to be slightly different. Long focal length requires a rotator. Foreign to me, but I've heard Eric say this too. Particularly RGB, right? Because if you're shooting RGB galaxies, you may be in a region where there just aren't many good guide stars.
Adam?
You need that guide star in the OAG. The OAG prism's small. You might have to pre-plan it. Yes, Eric, go ahead.
Well, as far as rotation, I try not to rotate it. And when you're in the Milky Way, there's usually, and you have a reasonably fast scope, which we do right now, you really don't have to rotate. If you have something like an F9 long focal length, you're constantly searching for a good guide star, and invariably you're going to have to rotate to find that star. And when you're outside the Milky Way, like in galaxies that are who knows where, you absolutely, again, have to have a rotator, and sometimes they're even skunked because there are no good guide stars for long focal length, reasonably slow scopes. But in the Milky Way, pick an angle, pick a lane, and you usually will be fine.
Yep.
As we wind down here, I'm just restarting my sequence in the back. It's been on hiatus while we had this session. So if anybody wants to watch how a Sequence Generator Pro sequence starts, this is kind of how it starts. So anyway, we can say goodnight anyway, because I think that's where we were headed.
Yeah, that's the worst thing would be to not be able to image your particular galaxy because you can't find a guide star. I mean, I'll say that as well. I went with when I got my RC. It was important to me to really have that reducer optimized so that I could get good guide stars. First, I wanted a large, fast system, but I didn't want to have to worry about guide stars, and I knew that could be a concern, so I was able to get it focal reduced kind of give it a nice balance of being long focal length, but relatively wider field. Not wide field, but just kind of that slight balance.
Yeah, I think having a big chip with the sensitive guide camera works wonders for all the other problems. A lot of the other problems go away a lot quicker that way.
Yep, and you know, one thing we didn't, you just only touched on quickly, and I see we've gone way over time, but you mentioned Sequence Generator Pro runs everything. It kind of works with PhD, but it actually works kind of synergistically with PhD. It unlocks additional features in PhD that kind of are really useful, whether it is dithering or just the fact that PhD can send commands back to Sequence Generator Pro that will give you slightly more information, or in the worst case scenario, give you an idea as to what caused your session to go awry. So the fact that the SGP guys and the PhD2 developers have worked together and kind of really taken both pieces of software to the next level is really beneficial to us end users.
For those of you who've been watching, you might have noticed that it didn't focus. That's because it was set to focus on the filter. Ooh, something's happened. I think I've lost my sky. It's clouds have been running through here, but at any rate, it didn't focus because it's told to focus when it changes filters, and it had been on the same filter all evening, so that wasn't the regular start for the evening. That's ugly, isn't it? I might have gotten a cloud.
Gotta be.
Anyway, it's time to say goodnight, folks.
All
Should
right.
we have another session like this? I think we should someday.
I think we should. I like this. There were, I can't remember the last time we had this many questions, comments. Really nice session.
And help from everybody else.
And the fact that it was clear skies for you and you're able to demonstrate live, that doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
Yep. Nicole, yes, the answer to your question is yes, quickly, but that's all you're going to get from me tonight. Good night, guys. We'll be on next week, whether it's an open session or whatever it may be. I will post hopefully by midweek, whatever it is we're doing, but we'll be here. Good night, guys. Thank you, Alex. Thank you all for watching.
Good night, everybody.